This is Voice of the Iceberg. I'm Alison Balance, and this is Endeavour, the final episode in a 4-part audio adventure from RNZ. We've journeyed to the Antarctic Peninsula with artist Joseph Michael and his team and discovered the varied voices of icebergs. As well as Joe, we've met behind-the-scenes director Ryan McNeil, sound recordist Mark Michelle, aka Mitch, and photographer Thomas Haleta. Now the team encounter their biggest icebergs and face their final challenge: how to project a digital berg onto the outside of the Auckland War Memorial Museum.
Icebergs are always unusual and cunning because sometimes you look at one and you might photograph it from one angle and it looks very bland and almost hidden in the landscape, and then you go around the other side of it and all of a sudden this amazing surface is revealed. Roger sent out an email via satellite to some of the other captains, and there was a captain of one boat emailed us one morning and said that he'd spotted a very impressive iceberg in one of the bays north of us, so we set out looking for it.
Lincoln, we can't really forget about it. When we heard that call, we knew it was going to be something, because otherwise who would just think that an iceberg was good enough to give a call and to have like another boat completely cross, the whole channel, I think it was the main channel, to go and see it. So we were completely certain that it would be an amazing one.
So we found Lincoln. There's a bit of excitement on the boat.
Let's finish it as we had, and then we can come.
I'd say it's pretty unique. I reckon this one's about an 11 out of 10 myself. We're lucky to find this one.
We were looking around for Lincoln and we spotted a huge one, but it had a very flat face, and we were looking for one with a big arch. And no, that can't be the one.
Square up on it in a minute.
When we arrived, it was sort of showing its back to us.
Watch this little growler, boys. It's going to give you a wee bump. Hitting it now.
We were a bit disappointed. Okay, that doesn't look... it had snow on it as well, and it was sort of a slope that was going straight into the water, so we didn't really know what to expect.
And sure enough, as we came around the corner in the boat, we saw this huge archway. Yeah, go Thomas, go. The whole archway would have been higher than the mast of the boat.
So when we came across Lincoln, we couldn't quite fathom what we were seeing. An iceberg of the size that it was, that had a giant dome carved out in the middle that was accessible by 3 archways.
I don't think I've ever seen something similar at all in my life. Oh, Lincoln. It's like childhood when you see a massive cake, like a meringue.
Well, Lincoln was just a big, heaving splendour. It had 3 archways. It looked like a architecturally designed building.
I think the interesting thing about this one, Thomas, is the anticipation, because from this back side it looks fairly plain.
Well, at first I thought it would be another George, to be fair.
Yeah, Roger seemed pretty confident that we'd find it.
It's never at first sight. You have to go around and look for it.
You could easily drive past this, because it was described by one of the ship captains as the best archway he'd ever seen. And so we were searching around this bay, not knowing where it was, and even as we got up, it takes a while to reveal itself, eh? As you came close to it, the sound was unusual. It sitting in the entrance of the archway, or close to it at least, it sounds like a thunderstorm. Get this rain sound, but you get the echoing from the chamber of the iceberg, and as pieces crack off the roof and fall down, it creates this thunderous echo, which, if you close your eyes, it sounds exactly like a thunderstorm.
rather excited to get out to the water and to experience this. And initially I sat outside the archways with a stereo mic and was getting some incredible audio from it. It was quite aggressive. There was a heck of a lot of movement. There was all sorts of sounds emanating from it, both above and beneath, and things were starting to carve off.
And the sounds that was making, the groans, the creaks, the claps, and it was just the cracking, and you couldn't see where it come from, and of course by the time you hear it, whatever that sound come from had done its business, and you'd often just see the wake. Roger was excited, super excited to get out in the tender and get close to this thing, and he had to take Mitch out there and navigate him pretty much into one of the archways.
So I went inside the dome, which was just mammoth sitting inside there. It felt like just an absolute speck, and was able to get about 15 minutes of recording with the surround sound microphone, and that by far was probably the most incredible of all the audio. It was just underpinned by dozens of different sounds. It was like a thunderstorm in many ways. There were large amounts of water that was flowing down off the side of it and dropping off from the top. There were little bits of ice that were coming off as well. There were fizzes and pops and cracks, and a really low frequency that was coming from probably the immense pressure that this iceberg was under, and the dome itself was amplifying the sound. So yeah, it's quite breathtaking, it really is.
Yeah, Lincoln was a joy to go around. It was a joy to sit with. Lincoln was a real joy to sit with for some time and just enjoy.
And that will be magnificent. So if on a building, you can imagine this is exactly the same thing. You have one side and just super simple, and then people go around the other side and you have the two archways and then a big archway on the front.
What sort of building can we map? Like a gym, maybe? Or a swimming pool?
A swimming pool. Oh, like the Bird's Nest or the Opera House in Sydney. You could use parts of this for the Opera House in Sydney, and that's definitely on the list.
This was our first epic iceberg encounter. It was like day 3, I think, or day 4 already, and we had mapped some icebergs before, but none of them gave us that reassuring feeling that we had what we wanted and we knew we could project map them. But with Ernest, we knew it was the one. It was the one that would make it first into a projection mapping. So we saw it from far away, and that side of it was already like a building. It was like a wall, pretty much a wall of ice.
You could see it on the radar, and Roger had a feeling. He sort of said, Joe, I think you're going to like this one. It's on the horizon, and if you can see something on the horizon that looks big, you get a fair idea when you get up to it. You're going to be breaking your neck to see the top of it.
When we started to get close, we actually started to realize that it would be too big for a building almost, So we circled twice around it. So the first one was to get really the detail of the ice, and the second one was to actually get the full-sized iceberg.
Ernest was incredible. The photographers got their shots and got what they needed to. Then we just sort of sat back and admired it. It was just so, I don't probably use the right terms, but it was so tabular, so square, so building-like, and especially in terms of the Auckland War Memorial Museum.
Projection mapping there's different techniques, but generally it's projecting an image back onto a building, but instead of using it as a cinema screen, you're using the architecture of the building or an object. You can projection map on anything really. You can project a map on a cat if you wanted. So we create a 3D model of the building, and then I photographically map the iceberg into these different elements of the building, and then I can sort of do interesting things with that surface. I'm combining the surface of the museum or the building, and I'm wanting to sort of confuse the audience as to whether they're looking at an iceberg or looking at a building.
Such a significant opportunity for Joe and the whole team to tell the story of Antarctica, give people a sense of awe and inspiration around being able to see Antarctica in an urban setting, which has never been done before.
The shape of Ernest lent itself well to the museum. It felt like its surface would work well on the museum, and the different contours that, there was some similarities in the contours of the museum and that iceberg. But Ernest it was quite a young iceberg. You could tell it was huge, but it had only just broken off a glacier. And there was something about, in my process in mapping these buildings, that it felt appropriate to choose, I call it young, but in a sense, quite a new iceberg as my first one. Have you heard the sound of pixels?
No.
Come with me. It's the sound of pixels.
Yeah, so we're just having a look at projection on a building at the moment.
Excited about it?
Yeah, no, it's just a great project to work on actually. Yeah, always enjoy these arty ones, the big ideas, and this is certainly a big idea, so it's going to look great, I think.
The Auckland Museum, in my mind, it's the most fantastic building in New Zealand. The situation, the way it's placed in the middle of the domain there is magnificent, and it's perfectly suited for projection mapping. It has a very even colour, which makes it useful for the projection mapping. If you've got a building that's got different colours of bricks, it sort of just affects your picture, but it's very consistent and it's very accurate. Yeah, I was talking to the guys who did our 3D model, because we create a 3D model of the building, and they mapped it, and they said it's one of the most precise buildings they've ever seen. It's just so straight, and I think that's something about the era that was created. It's obviously a very grand building as well, and I thought that the grandness of that building itself parallels the grandness of these icebergs. The idea with this iceberg is that we pretty much line it up to the size of the building.
Yeah, there's always a challenge. It's just working through the challenges, I think, is the important part. We haven't done the 360-degree version of the museum, though. This is a first. I'd say it'd be one of the biggest projection projects in this country by far.
John's concerned about these black holes.
Yeah, they're a problem.
Yeah. Any other problems that you see? Johns doesn't like the windows.
I hate the windows.
Yeah. What do you like about the building?
I love it.
Oh.
Apart from those circles, and we can get rid of the circles, that's easy.
Look at the cracks coming down the pole.
Oh, that's good, eh?
Might be some little caves and things. So the cave part looks quite cool.
Yeah, it does.
You see, we could have a part that falls off it, especially that crashing off, and then sound. Some of the icebergs we could hear the sounds, and you could hear the streams and the waterfalls coming, and you could see them as well. We could hear all of this from the boat, and obviously the cracks and the of some of the other icebergs is that as it falls off, you feel right through your body. That's one thing I'm trying to replicate a little bit in the using subs in the installation, is to use sound not just as an oral thing, but as a physical thing that you feel, because you very much feel a lot of the sound in Antarctica. You hear parts of it, but bass frequencies you feel.
So there's a range of speakers set up around the museum. I think about 20 different points of audio, and they'll be low-end subs to give people that real sense of that low frequency that we're able to capture in some of these with some of these icebergs that you almost feel more than you hear. And at different points around the museum as well, there's surround sound speakers set up so that people can not just experience it on a static level just by looking at it, but actually feel like they're sitting in the middle of the ocean looking at this iceberg, not just witnessing it from afar. Dave Whitehead's been working on the sound design. Of course, Rian Sheehan's bringing the installation to life with his beautiful music and his compositions.
My name is Rian Sheehan. I'm a composer, and my role on this project has been to create a musical landscape, I guess, that simmers away under the recordings and the imagery. As soon as he got back, he sent me a lot of Mitch's recordings of the ice, breaking up, and these just insanely detailed sonic soundscapes of that world. And I would just sit here and listen to them. And when you listen to those recordings, you really feel like you're there. So it's quite remarkable, I think. The more that I started working with the imagery, and the more that I spoke to Joe about it, the music, in a way, became. It didn't need to be the centre of attention. It became, I guess, the music needed to be a bit more understated and not as big and huge and epic as we originally intended. So that's the direction we've gone in. I mean, it's hard to work out what emotion Antarctica has. We didn't want it to sound, I didn't want it to sound new agey or too spiritual, so that's been tricky. But a lot of the time we realised that the music just needed to not get in the way of the soundscape of the environment, the incredible recordings that Mitch captured down there. So the music ended up being quite considered and, I guess, reserved in a lot of places. He wanted to capture the feeling that he had when he was down there on the ice. So he would talk to me about it, and we worked with Al Fraser, who's an amazing Wellington musician who plays and makes traditional Māori instruments. And he played, on this one, I think, the Pureri Hua. So I must have sent him lots of little snippets over the last year, and he fell in love with one in particular, and we developed that around a section of the show. It's very sparse, and I think he just felt that it kind of encompassed the feeling of what he was going for.
When I tell someone about Antarctica now, or I think about it, it's just how dynamic that place is in terms of movement and sound, of course, and light, and the way that the bergs move overnight. You wake up in the morning and either one's gone or three have come. The place is absolutely dynamic, and it changes and it breathes. It absolutely breathes. Daily, during the day, during the night. Things gather, things move apart, and things are created and things are destroyed, all in front of your eyes. You don't necessarily have to sit there for a whole day and watch it. You can see different elements of those forces at play throughout the day, but just being able to connect them, having the luxury of time to be able to connect them and put them together and see how that biosphere and cryosphere and all the spheres coming together down there is just really cool.
That was Endeavour, the fourth and final episode of Voice of the Iceberg, In this series you heard from Joseph Michael, Ryan McNeil, Mark Michelle, aka Mitch, Nick Fluvier, Thomas Haleta, Niwa scientist Mike Williams and composer Rhiann Sheehan. A big shout out to the rest of the team who had cameos in the location audio: Simon Godsiff, Jason Nichols, Jeff Ross and Nick Walker, and many thanks to Roger Wallace and the crew of Australis and sound designer Dave Whitehead. The Voice of the Iceberg podcast series was produced and edited for RNZ by me, Alison Ballance, with field audio from Ryan McNeil and Mark Michelle and sound engineering by Mark Chesterman. Music by Rhiann Sheehan was composed for Antarctica, While You Were Sleeping, an exhibition projecting a digital iceberg onto the exterior of the Auckland War Memorial Museum as part of the 2017 Auckland Arts Festival. The trip to Antarctica was made possible thanks to the generous support of the Wallace Arts Trust, Friedlander Foundation and Creative New Zealand. You can find all the episodes and photos of the bergs at rnz.co.nz/iceberg. You can also find the podcasts on iTunes and Spotify. And please, if you could take a moment to rate us, that would be fantastic. From the whole Voice of the Iceberg team, thanks for listening, and we'll leave you with the bergs.